First of all, nice to meet you. Thank you for joining. I'm super excited to have you here. We decided to do this session, and I'm going to get into it in a minute, because we've had quite a few back and forth with founders and what's been going on in the PR industry in the last year. And things have changed a lot. So I said, why don't we do a 20, 25-minute session for our founders and hopefully for other founders as well, that can give them tips and tools so that when they do want to do PR features, for fundraising rounds or etc., they're not, all of a sudden like, we didn't know any of this, and now it's all recorded, so it's all in the cloud, as we say. So thanks for joining me. I'm joined today by Daphne Algom. She is the co-founder of Headline Media. So Headline Media is a tech PR company. We've actually known Headline Media, the fund, for many, many years. We've worked with you guys. I think you've worked with over 50 unicorns, if I'm not mistaken. And I think you've worked with, most of the big Israeli companies. So you guys have a lot of experience under your belt. You've seen it all, as they say. And I think that it's great because you guys can give us the experience and the really know-how from a PR firm that can help our founders. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a 20-minute discussion. We're going to divide it into 3. We'll do back and forth. I'll ask you questions. Feel free to give us all the answers. Thank you so much for joining us. A little bit about you. So, and we have here an award-winning journalist. I know you worked for CNN and ABC, which is super, super exciting. And I know that you've been helping companies, how to build their growth visibility out in the world, I would say. And you've also been named one of Business Insider's top 50 PR people in tech, which is a huge accomplishment. So amazing. So believe me, she knows 1 or 2 things about PR. So listen carefully to what Daphne has to say. So thank you so much for joining us. Let's dive straight in. That's okay.
Sure.
So I think the first segment we wanted to discuss was actually the purpose of PR in 2025. At the end of the day, I know we've discussed it, that the fundamentals of PR haven't changed, but all the channels have changed. So if we want to start with the basics, why do so many tech companies prioritize international PR these days?
I think it helps them reach a lot of fundamental marketing goals and business goals at the same time, meaning you can build brand and share partnership news and hopefully ignite more partnership excitement, and at the same time talk about who's invested in you and why they've invested in you, and that attracts other fundraisers. So I think you're able to build buzz and brand and share your size and scope all in one channel.
Okay. All right. So there is a huge strategic importance behind the fundraising announcements, even if necessarily go on smaller channels.
Listen, fundraising does a lot of things, but first and foremost, it creates FOMO. And what I mean by that is, people get to read about a pain point, a solution, your differentiators, and who has backed you and believes in you. And in my experience, what that does is it ignites a lot of attention from other investors, meaning money begets money. And fundraising does another thing, which is it begins the conversation, meaning you come out to play, the media reports about you, people read about you, and it begins the conversation about your vision and your solution.
Okay. And I really do believe that it's about also building your brand. And there's a whole element of trust behind PR. If it's not only just for fundraising, but when we speak to founders, I always say when they start working with a PR, agency, you have 3 things to look at. You have the fundraising announcements that go out all the time. You have what I call information or data that you can give reporters, and then they can write about the company as well. And then I also really believe, and I see that companies have done this a lot lately, and tell me, I think it's good where founders give their opinion on different articles. So they're in contact with the reporters a lot, with the PR agencies, and then they can give, as a commenter on a different, on a certain, article. We do that a lot as a fund as well.
Listen, all those things are important. You can't build a brand with one fund raising announcement, but it definitely is the beginning of the conversation, and all of those things are important because, as you well know, part of your brand is your founding team, right? It's
Right.
how you make decisions, and it's also how readers, investors make decisions when they get to know you and your company and the problem and the solution. Part of the best solution is also believing in the people behind the solution. So, of
Yeah,
course, they should be talking, they should be interacting, they should be answering questions. They should be experts, not just in their product, but in their space, in their entire ecosystem.
I agree. How would you help founders today define success in PR, especially when they're raising or expanding?
So I think it really depends on the stage of the company, right? Because I think PR's primary purpose is to help companies reach their business goals. So when you're early, you need a stamp of legitimacy, right? And so that's part of what PR should be doing, showcasing your legitimacy. When you're mid-stage, then you're aspiring to build momentum, you're aspiring to get mentioned with the bigger players in your field. You should be sort of hitting out of your weight class. And when you're at later stages, or if you're public, then you want to show why you're the best, why you're the market leader, and the blue ocean of opportunity.
I agree. I think sometimes there's a little bit of a misunderstanding, especially when early stage founders, where they want to, like, their goal is what you said for mid stage companies, but not early stage. And then there's a little bit of confusion. And then a lot of them, they come to the PR agency and to the investors, and they're like, well, we want ABC. And I'm like, oh, you're on step, 5, 6, 7, but you haven't done step 1, 2, 3 first. So I think that's super important.
And they're half a gift. They have an opportunity which you don't have further down the line, which is you can talk all about vision. Meaning further down the line, you need to be showing your milestones, you need to be showing
Right.
your revenue, you need to be showing your partnerships. At very early stage, you need to really pinpoint your vision, the problem, the solution, and why you and your team are the right people to be solving the problem.
I agree. Which it kind of brings us on to the next segment, which I think, everyone's been discussing recently, and it's a whole shift in media. We've seen this a lot recently. At the end of the day, TechCrunch isn't dead. Okay. Well, they're still alive. They're still there, but the rules have completely changed. And I think for the longest time, especially in the last few years, like the funding announcements, it would be like, you have to get it to TechCrunch. It has to be, I would be laughing. Sometimes it'd be like in the inner pages. I don't know if you saw it, but like, it kind of generated this extremely powerful excitement among investors and among founders and companies. And I think entrepreneurs felt like this was like the ROI when they did this, and then it was in TechCrunch, and things have really changed. So what's happened? I know TechCrunch has shifted. What's going on there? Because it's important that founders know this.
Yes, TechCrunch has changed, and has changed because it's a business, right? It got acquired at the end of March by Regent, which is an investment house. Um, and prior to the acquisition, you saw changes begin, right? Like you saw that they were starting to slow down the focus on funding and expand the coverage of big tech. Why? Well, because they did a little due diligence, and in the due diligence, they realized that most of their traffic, A, comes from the US, and B, comes from Google search. So no one's searching a company they've never heard of. And then after the acquisition, they essentially laid off their entire European team. They laid off the Ingrids that we've worked with, the Mike
Yeah.
Butchers, eh, Paul Sawyers, meaning all the people who have traditionally covered Israeli tech were laid off. And now you're struggling with fewer reporters and a smaller appetite for fundraising. So it's not impossible. It can't be the only measure of success, because it's just much, much, much harder to accomplish.
Got it. Do you think that, like, what happened in TechCrunch is an indication of a wider trend that is going to happen in the media, or which is going on in like bigger news portals?
I think media and business are merging, and trying to figure out a profitable model has been hard. And so you're seeing a bunch of things happen. There are a lot of layoffs, there are fewer reporters, but at the same time, the reporters that have been laid off are innovating new ways to generate themselves income and revenue and a following. So you're seeing, on the one hand, the traditional media empires sort of tighten their belts and get smaller. And at the same time, new things are emerging, like Substacks and podcasts. So it's not that, it's just things are changing.
Okay, so all these, again, at the end of the day, are you saying that a lot of these reporters that don't no longer work in TechCrunch are also like starting their own podcasts and things like that, and that's also another a channel for for founders to use?
100%. Meaning you're seeing it across the board. You're seeing, Alex Conrad, who traditionally does the Midas list, now left Forbes and has his own podcast and Substack. So you're seeing just it's changing. That doesn't mean there aren't really great
No, of
traditional
course.
outlets for funding. Fortune, Wall Street Journal, these places have maybe not a specifically targeted audience like TechCrunch does, but they do other things. Like, for example, both Fortune and Wall Street Journal have newsletters, which means that they're not waiting for readers to come to them. They're going directly to the readers. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of value in other outlets. It's changing, and you cannot just depend on TechCrunch to do the work.
No, I agree. That was the next question, which we answered of where clients should, where do you tell clients now to try and focus if it's not just TechCrunch? I do think it's important that the client itself, the founders know, like you said, that there's more tangible ideas, if it's from newsletters, podcasts, additional things that these outlets are doing, which may sometimes even be better than just one article, which isn't actually promoted unless it's promoted, by the founder. So that's definitely a good point to review. And I assume, I mean, are there certain names that you think, like, are they different in the US and Europe, or mainly you think founders should still focus in the US?
I mean, this comes down to building a strategy,
Yeah.
right? It depends what their goals are and what they want to accomplish. If they're looking to raise money but they think their product is most suited to Europe, there
Yeah.
are really great outlets in Europe that are very targeted and very effective in accomplishing that goal. If they want to generate more widespread interest, then there are outlets like Business Insider and Axios and Fortune and Wall Street Journal that do that very, very well and very effectively. And then there are places like Forbes, meaning you need to sort of decide what your goals are, build a strategy, and then hyper target making that happen. The one thing I will say is that tactics have to change a little bit, because right now there is an immense appetite for exclusives. So if once upon a time you wanted to, go wide and go for quantity, that's less likely to happen with the top tier. You're going to have to offer an exclusive, and then right after they go live, it doesn't mean you can't get any other pieces. You just then have to go to your verticals, your trades.
And that's not I mean, I know we're off topic a bit, but isn't that also sometimes more problem? Because once you go exclusive, then sometimes other reporters don't necessarily want to do it because it's already been exclusive.
We have a funding for more than one top tier to cover it is so small that I think the strategy of finding that top tier person that is excited to cover your funding is strategic for you, and then afterwards go wide once it's live. So the verticals tend to not care, and they will cover you after the top tier outlet does. But
Okay.
you're right, you can't get a multitude of top tiers covering at the same time. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. And if, I mean, I do the PR in Israel for the companies, and I do see what happens sometimes when if we do an exclusive in the US and then ask the Israeli reporters to do it here, versus if we don't do an exclusive, but we do just, a generic like an embargo, and then we do it in Israel for everyone. It's very tricky. I think, there's so many aspects around this, but I do believe that the if the founder builds a strategy from the beginning of what they want and how they're going to get it, and like you said, they have to change their tactics. I think it's doable, and not just, okay, we want to be everywhere. We want everyone to know where we are. Or we want to just get into TechCrunch. So I think that's super important, which kind of brings us to the next topic of what I think we've also discussed this, but if you want to go a little bit more into detail of what founders need to know today, how to play smart in the PR landscape today, I would call it. So with all these changes, how should founders think when, raising around in 2025? What should they expect? Is there like a playbook where we can go a little bit more into the tactics?
Oh, listen, I think right. You need to decide what it is you want to accomplish. Then you need to decide what it is you want to say, and you need to say it over and over and over again. So, for example, you decide you're announcing your funding. You build out a strategy that the reason you want to, ignite attention from other investors primarily, but you also want the ecosystem to know about you. So you hyper target the right outlet. let's say it goes amazingly and that piece goes live and you're thrilled with it, and then your trades cover it as well. That's great news. Then you need to also share it on your socials. Make sure you put it in LinkedIn. You make sure that you're interacting with all of your different touch points in the most effective way possible, because you just don't know when the right person is going to see it and where they're going to see it. And so you just don't take any chances.
It's a bit of a wide question, but like, what does success look like now for a founder when he, pushes out a PR?
Well, it is like measuring PR is one of the most frustrating, hardest things to do. The good news is when it succeeds, you know. And you know because you receive inquiries, you receive attention from your target audience and the stakeholders you've trying to attract. Your biz dev team says it's useful in helping them sell the product. You need to sort of identify the people you're trying to attract, the different audiences, and if your PR is effective, it should do that over time. Now, that's not a particularly
Hold on,
satisfying
I like the
answer.
overtime. No, but the overtime is important because I think this is something that we should discuss. The overtime is something that a lot of times founders don't understand, this overtime situation where it's like, no, it's same as marketing. It takes a little bit of time. They want it now. They want it also, us Israelis, אנחנו כאן ועכשיו, sorry that I'm moving to Hebrew, we want everything now. So I think that overtime is a super important point where it also has to, you tell me, continue to push out, like, and continue to use it over and over again. Like you said, continue to tell your story, even if it's like the PR or stuff that you've promoted out, because it takes time.
It does. And I know that's not super satisfying, but let's go back to your product. Your product also takes
Yeah.
time. And I think that's something that founders understand because they tend to be technical. But from my experience, marketing outperforms product almost always. But it doesn't happen overnight. You need to start with the vision. You need to start with like building brand recognition. And the jump from brand recognition to market leadership doesn't happen overnight. Even building brand takes a minute because generally very few ideas are absolutely unique. There's usually competitors, there's other people in the space, and you need to showcase your differentiators. And if you do it once, nobody hears it. You do it twice, three times, four times. That's how you sort of cement your name and your brand. And it takes time. It just doesn't happen
Yeah.
overnight, no matter what you do.
Tell me, what do you think of this? I mean, we have companies where they don't necessarily have a PR agency, but what they do is they've taken a PR agency for the funding round, and then I see them every time they do a product release, they promote it, on Business Wire. They do it in-house, and then I think it's good because I get all the alerts for the companies, but I see, let's say once a month, once every 2 months, there is always a product release on this company. So they're always staying relevant, even if they're, like you said, they're not, talking about fundraising, but sometimes it's, customers they've closed. A lot of times it's just different product releases they've done. It's kind of like a blue ocean because you're like sending it out there and hoping someone will pick it up. But the question is, down the long run, is it effective?
It depends. Again, yes, it is effective. And yes, it's important. Is it the most effective way? No. But is it a way to do it? It is. And I'll tell you why. First of all, a cadence is something everybody wants to see, right? You Google a company because you're looking into them and you want to see that they have improved, they've reached some milestones, they have some partnerships, their product has evolved. You want to see movement and momentum. And so if that is the only way they can do it, then that's something. It counts. Is it the most effective way? Not necessarily, because you also want to show thought leadership. You also want to flex with your knowledge and understanding beyond the micro of what you do, but the macro of the space, because technology is constantly evolving and changing, and hearing how insights and it's like transitive property. People tend to feel how smart a person is how good their product is going to be.
Okay.
So it's it's important to have a cadence, but that's just one step, one piece of the puzzle.
So I have a question about that, like just down the line, but I do have everyone's talking about the geo and the whole, how people, how geo is changing and how people, have trust and content and all that. And really it's important. What do founders need to know? Like, what can you tell founders that they don't necessarily know this?
Okay, a couple things. One, Google search is still the number one search. That's not to say we can ignore ChatGPT and other sort of generative AI driven search. We can't. And geo is changing all the time, meaning the rules of engagement are changing. So everything I say today could be moot tomorrow. That's just a fact.
Okay, fair.
But here's the deal. They have licensing relationships with different media houses. And so different like media or different outlets rank higher in geo. So, for example, ChatGPT has a relationship with Business Insider and Wall Street Journal. So, if you are down on Wall Street Journal because the articles tend to be behind a paywall, then the counter argument is, but it shows up on Geo. So, that's really important to know. The other thing we get asked often is if PR Newswire or Business Wire was good for SEO, is it good for ChatGPT and the like? And the answer is yes, because ChatGPT and counterparts care about both quality and quantity. So you need to invest in putting out content. Your blogs need to be tight. You need to be doing thought leadership. You need to be interacting with your trades. And you need to be very mindful of the top tier you play with because you want them to be seen by, ChatGPT. The flip side is your messaging has never been more important because ChatGPT tends to sum you up in a sentence. And so you
Right.
want to control what that sentence sounds like and looks like. And so you need to be very mindful of that. But yes, like things are changing if once upon a time people were writing content for SEO, they also
Yeah,
now
but
need
that's
to be interacting with media for geo.
interesting. I think that's a super valid point, and I really think that founders need to focus on that as well, marketing teams. I want to go back before we close it up and we have a last session, which is more of a fun part. A lot of a lot of early stage companies, that start don't actually have the budget for PR agencies. And a lot of them they come to me and they're like, when should we start taking a PR agency? Now, I don't always have the answer for them. I think it's very tricky and it depends on the market and the product and who they are. But how, and again, I don't know if you have the answer at the end of the day, and how should early stage companies, ones with like an unlimited budget, think about media? Should they say, okay, now that things are changing, yes, PR companies, it is more important to take at an earlier stage in the marketing strategy where, a few years ago you could have taken it, closer to round A. And I think it's important because things are changing all the time.
I'll start with this, that second time founders tend to start with PR as early as possible. Meaning, I think traditionally you're right. People came to PR later because it was a luxury item. And in fact, I think they came to marketing in general
Right,
later. Like they prioritized marketing as a second tier activity and a second tier like cost, essentially.
right.
And I think that has changed tremendously. I think the earlier you set a footprint, the better it is for your company. That doesn't mean that you have the budget to do a marathon and to consistently invest in PR, and that makes sense. Do a sprint. Make sure that when you actually have news, it gets out and it gets out well and strategically and thoughtfully and mindfully. But honestly, the most interesting thing I've seen is that when second time founders come back, they come back with an idea and then
Mhm.
they really want to start building out their space in the ecosystem, their voice, their expertise. They really want to showcase that early because they understand the importance of that for brand building and for building that cadence towards market leadership.
Okay. All right, interesting. Thank you for that. I think we've had like a short 20-minute, but I think we've covered a lot. So the last part is more of a fun little question part. I'm going to shoot you questions. You have like 30 seconds to answer each one. They can be less, but you can decide also if you don't want to answer them, but you have to answer them. So the first question is, biggest myth founders believe about PR?
I think the biggest myth is that it's all about our friends. Meaning the fact that I work with ABC and CNN doesn't mean that ABC and CNN is going to cover anything I ask for. And you can't build a strategy around a favor. So like I think people tend to say things like, so who do you know? Or, can't you just call a friend? And
Oh,
the answer to that is
I'll
no.
use the Havel telephone. Is it more of Israeli founders or it's just in general? Because we Israeli love our connection with each other.
No, I think it's like this madman perception that PR people and media people are sitting around having drinks together. And it's not really the case. First of all, like journalists are like writing, banging out 10 stories a day. They want to be pitched quickly, efficiently. They want you to make their story like easy and accessible to digest. And they're not in it for the schmooze.
Okay. Got it. All right. One outlet or channel startups underestimate.
I think LinkedIn, meaning I think there's the media and they'll always ask us, okay, so how many UMVs does that outlet have? How much readership
Mm.
or eyeballs does it generate? And I think they need to also be thinking about putting out third-party endorsement on their LinkedIn where they also have very, very targeted eyeballs.
Yeah.
So I think LinkedIn is something that everyone should be using to showcase the hits they're receiving, the media they're receiving, because I think it's a very powerful tool.
Okay. Your go-to advice for getting a journalist's attention in 2025?
Well, it's the same for 2024 and 2020, but lead with your sexiest stuff. And I don't think people always know what that is. I think, especially here, people think their product or like the intricacies of their technology is their sexiest stuff. And that's generally not true. It's generally, not generally, but it can be the founder, it can be the investor, it can be how easily they raised, it can be
Yeah.
the pain point. So it's like the inverted pyramid. You need to start with your sexiest stuff because if it's not there at the top, you're not going to get them to keep reading. And I would even suggest that your sexiest stuff be in the subject line of your email.
We raised
Boring,
within
not
24
particularly
hours.
sexy. Exactly. Like that kind of stuff works.
Oh, got it. If you had to choose a mention in TechCrunch or a LinkedIn post from a respected venture capital fund, stage one. No, it's okay. Like everyone's in
Uh,
the US.
Look, it's a very like boring answer. And well, it depends on what your goals are. Meaning, if you
You
have a
have to
third
pick
party
one.
endorsement, if you want a third party endorsement, TechCrunch wins. If your VC has a vested interest, it's not as impactful as having a third party endorse you. But you want both. I say,
Okay.
why choose? Force your VC to post about you too.
Of course, we always post about it. We love our founders. Okay, now you have a choice between two questions. You can either give us a 30-second real founder success story, or you can give us the juice of the worst pitch you've ever heard. It doesn't have to have any names. I
Okay,
think we should go on the
so
sexier side because it's fun. Like,
okay,
yes,
so this is
it's
like a
your
mea
turn.
culpa. We started working with a company that is like a household name here. People love them. They're very successful. But we kicked off with them before, like when they were in stealth and they wanted to go live. So I was the person who like took this meeting with the company. And the founder, rightly so, had a ton of pressure to launch as quickly as possible. Um, and I didn't think they were quite ready from a media perspective, meaning what do I know about product? Nothing. But from a media perspective, I started asking really hard questions that I knew a journalist was going to ask as they launched their product. Well, I think I nearly got fired in that first meeting. No one appreciated my difficult questions, but I will say that they did understand that they were questions they couldn't answer. And so they waited and we worked together to figure out the exact right messaging because you can't launch a company twice. And so
Totally
I
agree with that.
eventually, when they launched successfully, I think they appreciated how annoying I was in that first call, but I'm pretty damn sure I almost got fired in that first call.
It would have been their loss, believe me. So, all right, that sounds good. Well, first of all, thank you so, so much. I think that I'm going to summarize this and I'll also write a post about it. But I think at the end of the day, um, founders definitely, especially ones which, a lot of the founders in Israel are super techy. They don't have that marketing slash PR slash, I would say creative. They're super tech and they're super creative in that side. But when it comes to other things, I think they do need to listen to people that come from this and understand the ins and outs of PR and ins and outs of when you're going to launch. Like you said, a company cannot launch twice. And if you miss it the first time, haval, as they say. So I think there's a lot that you've taught them today, and I hope that they listen to this. I know they'll listen to this because I'm going to make them listen to this. Um, Thank you for your time. I super appreciate it. I think the PR world is evolving so fast. I remember I started like, I don't know, what was it like 17 years ago? I don't know how old I am now, but like 17 years ago, and there's 18 years ago in the industry. And like I remember working with PR agencies, and you have to keep, like in marketing, rethinking the game, seeing what works, being, always one step ahead of the game, especially with what's going on in the tech world today and AI and everything. And I think it's also a little bit tricky because, you say, okay, I can do everything on my own. I have AI, I can do everything. And sometimes it doesn't always work. Like sometimes you need to go back to the basics and see. And that's interesting. I think we're going to see what's going to change in like the next year. And we may have this conversation again in 1 year and everything will be different. Who knows? Maybe not.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Like, as I said, everything related to ChatGPT, what I say today could be completely different tomorrow. But yeah, I think we in Israel sometimes undervalue marketing. And from my experience with over 400 companies, marketing always outperforms product. And you need to feel very comfortable to talk about your vision, to talk about what you will be able to achieve. And the sooner you talk about it, the more compelling and the more comfortable people are of associating you with that solution. And that's the secret.
That's great. I like that. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. And I'm sure that you will give a lot of value to our founders, not just to our founders, but to anyone that listens to this. So I really appreciate it. And thank you very much. And guys, if you ever need a PR agency, go to them.
Thank you. Yeah. It's lovely
Thank
talking to
you.
you.
You too.